Well, for more on that story, and these are the after effects of that attack in Kenya, let's take you to the regional editor of the Africa Report, Crystal Orderson. Crystal, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. You know, one of the bigger or broader conversations now, we heard from Uhuru Kenyatta. Certainly his words will bring some kind of a comfort, but the broader question remains around security in Kenya. As long as Kenya continues to support the initiatives to fight Al-Shabaab in Somalia, are they taking enough security measures locally to ensure that their own citizens are protected?
Good afternoon, Kathy. I think that's the big question Kenyans are asking today, because we do know the broader context is Westgate that happened in 2013, 70 people being killed, and then, of course, the university attack that saw even double that amount of people being killed in 2015. So I think 2015 up until now, Kenya, of course, have boosted security. They've boosted internal security apparatus in terms of the intelligence sources and agencies, and, of course, cooperation with allies like the US and the UK, and of course even China. So we, for instance, saw with the help of Kenya, there's been about 50 airstrikes in Somalia that the US undertook, and so we do see that Al-Shabaab claiming responsibility, again saying it's because Kenya is part of that African Union mission in Somalia. They've been there for several years, and of course part of 6 African nations that's part of that mission in Somalia, one of the largest peacekeeping missions in the world, 22,000 soldiers. But of course it's been the one of the only countries that's actually had these horrific terror attacks, Kathy.
And so from a regional perspective, because, you know, there's always talk about that porous border that Kenya has between itself and Somalia, and the fact that it's not very well regulated. Is there a different kind of response that the region can come together to almost support Kenya?
Kenya, of course, have come out and President Uhuru Kenyatta thanking his international partners that have immediately come and said they will help, the US, China, the UK and other African regional leaders. So I think for me, if we look at the recent peace agreement between Ethiopia and Eritrea, which also means that Eritrea and Somalia also have some kind of peace agreement, there's been always allegations that Eritrea has been supporting Somalian groups that are not part of government. So I think regionally, the fact that there's this peace treaty between those 3 countries is, I think, quite essential to understand the broader African initiatives that's taking part. And so I do think that will assist Kenya. I do think we're going to see a greater intelligence operations between the countries, intelligence sharing, because Eritrea has been brought out of the cold and is now part of the regional body and part of regional engagement, which is, we of course have the regional body called IGAD, which is the Intergovernmental Authority for East Africa. And so I do think that is one step. Of course, I do think we're going to see an increase of military and air strikes in Somalia following this attack. And I think now there's also, of course, concern within Kenya. There is a large Somalian population, that there might be some counter-attacks on the Somalian community and concern of the security situation within those communities.
Well, interestingly enough, we had the opposition leader there, Raila Odinga, speaking out about this, but emphasizing, I think, the point of unity and how Kenyans need to stand together at this time. How important is it, not just from a perceptions point of view, that he's taking this position and he's supporting President Kenyatta?
Kathy, exactly a year ago, Raila Odinga was on the exact opposite spectrum politically. He had his own mock inauguration. He was totally against President Uhuru Kenyatta and his presidency, and very critical. The fact that that relationship has shifted and that he's coming out and saying we need to stand together. So he's putting aside his, you know, the historic political baggage and disliking of Uhuru Kenyatta and the government. He's put that totally aside, speaking out of unity. and standing together, I think, is absolutely essential for Kenya. And I think it also just will mean that, politics aside, opposition parties and the governing ruling party can work together. And already we see different hashtags of Kenyans standing together, this total outpouring of support and nationalism, so to say, in Kenya, where ordinary people are coming to give food to army and other security officials. We see Uber have given free rides to anyone offering and donating blood. So really the nation is coming together, and Raila Odinga, as one of the key political figures in that country that's often had, harsh criticism for Uhuru Kenyatta, coming out saying we must stand together, really bodes well for nation building in that country.
All right. Crystal, just before I let you go, some of the scenes that we saw yesterday, there's no mistaking the sheer fear and terror that was so clear on people's faces. The primary protection of citizens remains the key concern now. What are people being told in terms of the potential risk or threat that still exists? I mean, do we know what Al-Shabaab's next move may be? Have they said at all?
Well, I think obviously this morning's address by Uhuru Kenyatta really emphasized that the security forces are in charge. People should go back to work. But of course, there's terror and fear. You can imagine this building, Kathy, is one, obviously a building where there's lots of expats. It was a very fancy hotel. It's the Nairobi headquarters of Paul the soap company, Colgate. So you would think that this is a well-secured building. And if, this type of building can come under attack, then clearly Al-Shabaab has had quite a few buildings under their radar. And in fact, the Kenyan intelligence forces have said that they foiled a number of attacks that Al-Shabaab tried. In fact, they tried to plan an attack near to the police headquarters last year. So I do think, security forces on high alert. And despite assurances of Uhuru Kenyatta that people should go back, I think there is still fear amongst ordinary citizens, Kathy.
All right. Well, our thoughts and prayers stay with the people of Kenya as they try and recover from what happened yesterday. That was the regional editor of the Africa Report, Crystal Orderson.